The story began with a boy named Aono Eiji, who was traveling by metro when he suddenly received a message from Miyuki. In the message, she apologized and explained that something urgent had come up related to her club activities, and she couldn't get away from it. Eiji replied saying he understood, told her not to worry, and wished her good luck with her club practice. But as he read her message, it struck him. It was supposed to be their special birthday date. His mind drifted back to how things had started. Amanda Miyuki, his childhood friend, had become his girlfriend after he confessed his feelings to her last Christmas. To him, she had always seemed like an idol, someone far out of reach, someone he admired from a distance. He believed that if they hadn't grown up together, he probably wouldn't have had the courage to even talk to her, let alone be in a relationship. It had been 6 months since they started dating, but because of his hesitation, they hadn't even shared their first kiss yet. He never imagined that she would cancel their very first official date. He had gone all out, making plans to make the day special. As the metro reached a stop, he stepped out and realized he had arrived at the movie theater where they were supposed to go together. Standing there, he began imagining what it would have been like, sitting beside her, holding her hand, sharing that perfect moment. But he quickly shook his head, snapping out of his daydream, wondering why he was getting lost in such thoughts. He turned away and started walking down the street. As he passed by, he suddenly noticed a couple kissing. He paused, caught off guard by the sight, and realized the area looked oddly familiar. Then it suddenly hit Eiji. He had wandered into the Love Hotel district. The realization left him completely stunned. His thoughts drifted to a memory of being in a hotel room with Miyuki, the two of them sitting awkwardly on the bed. He felt a wave of frustration wash over him and mentally berated himself, calling himself an idiot for letting his imagination run wild. Deciding it was best to leave, he turned to go back the way he came. Just then, he heard a girl behind him pleading with a boy to stop. Something about her voice struck a chord. It sounded familiar. Curiosity made him turn around, and to his shock, he saw Miyuki standing there with another boy. In disbelief, he blurted out her name, asking if it was really her. She too looked startled and called out his name in return. For a moment, they both stood frozen, questioning each other about why the other was there. But Eiji's confusion quickly turned to anger. He marched up to her and grabbed her wrist tightly, demanding an explanation. She flinched in pain and told him he was hurting her. Only then did he realize how hard he had been gripping her and quickly let go, murmuring an apology. Before he could say anything else, the boy with Miyuki stepped forward and, without warning, slapped Eiji across the face with such force that he stumbled and fell to the ground. Dazed, Eiji stared up at the boy and asked what was going on. The boy, clearly furious, snapped back and asked what Eiji thought he was doing to his girl. Still trying to make sense of the situation, Eiji said that Miyuki had been the one who cheated. But the boy just scoffed and accused Eiji of being nothing more than a stalker. He then turned to Miyuki and urged her to speak, maybe tell Eiji the truth, like how she was only dating him because they were childhood friends, or how she always thought he was boring. With a mocking laugh, he even added that she found Eiji's sweaty hands disgusting whenever he tried to hold hers. The words hit Eiji like a punch to the gut. He stared at Miyuki, barely able to whisper her name, waiting for her to deny it. But the boy, senpai, as she had once called him, continued, reminding her that she used to say such things whenever they were in bed together. Miyuki stood frozen, shocked by what he had just revealed. Senpai then looked at her and asked gently what was wrong. He told her that if she really liked Eiji that much, he wouldn't mind walking away. Right there, right then. He gave her a choice. Either break up with Eiji or end things with him. Trembling, Miyuki begged him not to abandon her. She said that if he left, she wouldn't be able to go on. Senpai smiled softly, placed a hand on her head, and told her that as long as she understood her place, that was enough for him. Then, in a calm but firm tone, he asked her to say it clearly, out loud, who Eiji really was. She finally responded, saying that although Eiji had once been her childhood friend, now he felt more like a clingy stalker, an abusive, horrible boyfriend she could no longer tolerate. Senpai, clearly enjoying the scene, urged her to say it more clearly, to tell that delusional stalker directly and without hesitation. Miyuki turned to Eiji, hesitated for a moment, and then apologized. She told him that she couldn't be with him anymore and asked him not to talk to her at school either. Her words, though soft, hit harder than any slap. And just like that, a line was drawn. From that moment onward, Eiji felt as though his once peaceful and happy everyday life had started crumbling around him. Later that day, he returned home to Kitchen Aono, the family's small restaurant, where his parents were busy preparing food in the kitchen. His father greeted him warmly, unaware of the storm Eiji carried inside, while his mother, glancing at the clock, remarked that he was home earlier than usual. His brother also noticed something was off and asked if he had skipped lunch, offering to make him something to eat. Eiji simply smiled faintly, said he was fine, and thanked him. But deep down, he felt anything but fine. He quietly went to his room and lay on his bed, too shaken to move, too hollow to cry. The hours passed, but he barely noticed. The silence of his room became heavy, and each second felt like a weight pressing down on him. Over and over, he saw the same thing: Miyuki and Senpai together, sitting intimately on a bed. In the dream, Miyuki laughed and told Senpai how disgusting she found Eiji. She said he had completely misunderstood their relationship just because they were childhood friends and had grown unbearably clingy. Senpai smirked and told her to forget about that creepy guy, that she only needed to focus on him now. She nodded in agreement, and then, right in front of Eiji's helpless dream self, the two of them began to kiss. It was unbearable. In the dream, Eiji silently screamed for it all to stop. Just stop already. But the nightmare wouldn't end. When it finally did, he jolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat and unable to breathe properly. He realized then how afraid he had become, even of falling asleep. Unable to lie still any longer, he got up, washed his face to chase away the lingering horror, prepared himself for an evening walk, hoping the fresh air might clear his thoughts, or at least numb the ache in his chest. Eiji was walking down the street, lost in his thoughts, when a classmate approached him from behind, casually slinging an arm around his shoulder and asking if there was anything new with Amada-san. Eiji gave a faint, awkward laugh and replied vaguely that things were well. At that moment, he heard someone call his name. When he turned around, he saw Miyuki looking at him, which brought back memories from their childhood. He recalled a long-ago moment when Miyuki had asked if there was someone he liked. He had nervously asked why she suddenly brought that up. Trying to explain, she had told him he never talked about such things, and even she rarely mentioned those topics. In response, she had playfully suggested that maybe she should just become his bride. Eiji had been surprised and confused, but Miyuki laughed and said she was just kidding. He told her to cut it out, but she continued laughing and teased him, saying he had taken her seriously. Returning to the present, as Eiji stood there, he suddenly noticed Miyuki standing in front of him. Summoning his courage, he tried to speak to her, but she turned back slowly and quietly said his name. Before he could reply, another girl abruptly stepped between them and with a sharp glare told him not to get involved with Miyuki anymore, calling him an abusive creep. Eiji was left in shock, unable to understand her words. The girl grabbed Miyuki's arm, saying it was time to go and warning Eiji that if he continued stalking Miyuki, she wouldn't let him get away with it. Speaking directly to Miyuki, she urged her to properly ignore stalkers and not give in, to which Miyuki quietly replied, "Yeah." After returning home, Eiji lay down on his bed, trying to block out the events of the day. Just as he was settling into silence, his phone suddenly vibrated beside him. Startled, he sat up and quickly grabbed it. When he checked the screen, he saw the message had come from an unknown account. Opening it, he was shocked to read, "Die, you are disgusting." His eyes widened in disbelief as more hateful messages flooded in, with insults like abusive scumbag, violent jerk, creep, cheater, and scum, repeated over and over. His inbox filled with subject lines such as, "This violent creep, the worst, stalker, and just drop out." It felt as if those voices were echoing in his mind. Staring at the screen in disbelief, he muttered to himself that he hadn't done anything wrong and wondered what was happening and why he was being treated that way. Overcome by anxiety, Eiji suddenly sprang from his bed in panic. The next day, Eiji had forced himself to go to school, even though his heart felt heavy. As he stood in front of the classroom door, he tried to calm the storm inside him, quietly convincing himself that everything would be fine, that he just needed to act like it was a normal day. With that fragile resolve, he opened the door, and walked in. He moved silently to his seat, but no matter how hard he tried to ignore them, the hushed whispers and sideways glances that followed him made it impossible to pretend nothing had changed. He tried to hold himself together, repeating to himself over and over that he hadn't done anything wrong. But before he could settle into that fragile sense of control, one of his classmates suddenly slammed her desk and shouted at him, calling him a criminal. She had declared firmly that Miyuki would never lie, and that even Kondo-senpai from the soccer club had seen the incident. With two respected students backing the same story and someone like Eiji on the other side, everyone supposedly knew who to believe. Eiji, unable to bear the weight of it any longer, had told himself he didn't want to hear any more. He couldn't understand how things had spiraled so far out of control. All he could feel was despair. That day, he spent lunch completely alone. Then his phone vibrated. When he checked the screen, he saw a message from the club president informing him that the club meeting had been canceled and that there was no need for him to show up. As he walked through the hallway afterward, Eiji couldn't help but think bitterly that there was no one left in the class he could trust anymore. And yet, despite everything, a tiny flicker of hope still clung to him. Even though the message had been clear, he told himself that maybe, just maybe, someone might still be there at the clubroom, waiting. Eiji had wondered if there might still be someone he could talk to, maybe even ask for help. With that faint hope in mind, he made his way to the clubroom. As he approached the door, he heard familiar voices coming from inside. He paused, only to catch snippets of their conversation. One of the club members was asking whether they had remembered to lie to Aono and tell him the club was canceled. The club president responded that he had already messaged Aono during lunch. Another voice chimed in, saying it was scary just seeing him around. Then, their tone shifted as they began discussing the draft Eiji had drawn. One of them mockingly asked what they were supposed to do with it, adding that Aono had no real talent, but still had the nerve to put so much effort into the manuscript. Another voice cruelly remarked that he was seriously pathetic. Eiji stood there in silence, each word cutting deeper than the last. It became painfully clear to him that he no longer had anyone left on his side. For a moment, he thought perhaps his homeroom teacher, Ms. Aish, might be someone he could still rely on. Maybe, just maybe, she would listen. When he reached the classroom, he stopped at the doorway. Inside, he saw Miyuki and her friend speaking with the teacher. Quietly, he stayed back and listened. Miyuki's friend was telling the teacher that Miyuki had seemed troubled recently and asked if she could talk to her privately. Ms. Aish responded kindly, noting that it was rare for Amada-san to be the one going through a hard time. She gently asked if Miyuki had perhaps gotten caught up in something because of her kindness. Miyuki nodded softly and said it was something like that. The teacher reassured her, saying that it was all right and that there was no other student as exceptional as she was. She added that she would always be on Miyuki's side. Hearing those words, Eiji felt something inside him collapse. He couldn't take it anymore. Without making a sound, he turned and ran from the classroom, his thoughts in turmoil. He made his way to the locker room, hoping to clear his head, but what he found there only worsened everything. As soon as he opened his locker, dozens of crumpled papers spilled out onto the floor. Each one was covered in hateful scribbles and venomous messages. One warned him not to snitch, or the writer would report him to the authorities, ending the note with a mocking "LOL." Another message bluntly asked if he had died yet. Without thinking, he turned and bolted out of the school, unable to stay another moment. He didn't stop running until he reached home. When he walked in, his mother greeted him warmly, asking if the club had ended early. Eiji simply told her that he was home and explained that the club meeting had been canceled at the last minute. His mother nodded gently, remarking that he hadn't seemed well lately and reminding him with quiet concern to make sure he got enough rest. Eiji thanked her softly, also noting that both she and his brother must be tired too. But his mother only smiled in response, telling him that kids shouldn't worry about grown-ups, that it was their job to care for him, not the other way around. His older brother, who had just stepped into the room, telling Eiji that he should just enjoy school and focus on being a student. That was all they ever wanted from him. Since their father's passing, Eiji had always noticed something unspoken in their home. Their mother had never once cried in front of them. She had always kept a smile on her face, pushing through the hardest days just to shield them from worry. His brother, too, had taken on a quiet strength. He had stepped into their father's role with steady resolve, doing his best to support both the family and the small shop they ran. Watching them, Eiji had felt a deep weight settle on his heart. He told himself that he would do his best too, that if he just kept enduring things, then no one else would have to sacrifice their happiness. Meanwhile, in a quiet room somewhere else, Miyuki sat on her bed in silence. Her thoughts drifted endlessly, refusing to let her rest. Ever since that day, sleep had become elusive. Over and over again, she kept asking herself why things had turned out this way. Sometimes she even wondered if it had all been a bad dream. She thought back to that day, telling herself that maybe, if Kondo-senpai hadn't been there, and if she had just clung to Eiji and cried, begging him not to break up, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe it could have been different. When she had later seen how Eiji was being bullied, she had felt her chest tighten. Her eyes had burned with the threat of tears. But she had told herself that she couldn't cry. She was the one who didn't deserve to cry. Not after everything. She had given up that right. Everything had started so innocently, just a silly conversation about love. Back then, she had been happy with Eiji, but their relationship had stalled, or at least that's what her friends had believed. They had misunderstood her uncertainty and introduced her to Kondo-senpai, someone who, they claimed, understood relationships better. At first, she had resisted, but Kondo-senpai had been everything people admired: athletic, intelligent, the ace of the soccer team, effortlessly handsome, and always gentle. Compared to the awkward innocence she shared with Eiji, Kondo seemed mature, like someone who had figured everything out. He had made her feel seen in a way that confused her. She remembered a moment when he had looked at her and said that no guy could resist a cute girl like her. Then, with a laugh, he had added that he was just joking. She hadn't known how to respond. Before the awkwardness could settle, he had smiled and casually asked if she wanted to drink something else. Before walking away, he had told her that she was seriously attractive and suggested that maybe Eiji was simply intimidated by that. She had begun recounting the events of that evening when Kondo-san had gently pulled her close and kissed her deeply. She had reflected that everything she had meant to give to Eiji had ended up being taken by someone else. It had not taken long before Kondo-san had taken it all away. Later, while lying quietly in bed beside him, she had remained silent under the covers. Kondo had smiled and had told her that it was okay. He had said that if someone did not make a move on a girlfriend as attractive as Miyuki, then it was that person's fault. He had assured her that she was not the one in the wrong, rather the one who had failed as a man was Eiji. Then she had recalled how Kondo had pulled her close again, asking suggestively if they could do it once more. She had not resisted. At that moment, she thought that she had likely been the perfect mark. However, she admitted to herself that a part of her had felt strangely good about the guilt. And once she had become completely dependent on him, she had realized there was no turning back. After that, they sat in silence for a while. Kondo casually checked his phone and mentioned that the club on the 30th had been cancelled, suggesting that they hang out instead. She hesitantly responded, saying that the 30th was Eiji's birthday. Kondo shrugged it off and said indifferently that he would just ask another girl then. She was visibly shocked and asked him what he meant by that. He explained that she was always prioritizing Eiji, and it had made him feel like he barely existed in her world. He admitted he was tired of trying to control her and suggested they end their relationship, claiming it would make both of them happier. Panicked, she asked what he was saying and pleaded with him to wait just a second. And so, she had chosen Senpai. She had believed that Eiji would forgive her, that he would still accept her in the end. She had been relying on that hope. After all, he was the one she had spent over 10 years with, the person she had believed to be her destined partner. She had truly thought she would marry Eiji, but the woman within her had whispered something different. She had felt the urge to confess everything, to tell everyone the truth, that it had been her who had led things astray, who had cheated, and yet she had been terrified of losing everything if she did. The next day at school, when Eiji walked in and opened his locker, trays fell out, and he found sticky notes with hurtful messages written about him. Later, as he walked through the school corridor, he overheard students whispering and gossiping about him. He heard a group of girls saying they didn't want to talk to him anymore. When he opened the classroom door, he saw a picture of himself on the whiteboard with a message telling him he wasn't welcome and should leave the class. There was even an image of his father's shop among the things displayed, and when he saw it, he was completely stunned. He hadn't expected them to go that far. He couldn't help but feel that he was the reason behind the damage to his father's reputation, and that thought tore him apart inside. A deep sense of guilt and helplessness began to rise in him. Unable to bear it anymore, he opened the door in a rush. Unable to bear it anymore, he opened the door in a rush, and to his surprise, Kondo was standing right there. Kondo looked at him with a twisted smile and mockingly asked how it felt to be the criminal boy. Eiji, still shaken, asked why Kondo would spread such a terrible lie about him. In response, Kondo casually said that he did it because it was fun, watching him lose everything, including his girlfriend. According to Kondo, the whole thing made for a great show. Then Kondo cruelly added that it was the boy's own fault for believing that someone like him could ever be with Miyuki. He said the boy should just drop out because ruining people's lives was something Kondo actually enjoyed. Those words hit the boy harder than anything else. He dropped to his knees, completely broken, hopelessness filling every part of him, until he finally lost consciousness and fainted. Later, while Eiji was in the medical room, the medical teacher told him that she would inform his homeroom teacher, just in case. Eiji thanked her politely. After that, he sat down on the medical bed, his thoughts clouded with hopelessness. He felt that no one was going to help him, not even the teacher. In his mind, people would naturally side with someone like Miyuki, who was smart and capable, rather than with someone like him. He believed he couldn't even talk to his parents or his brother about it. After being betrayed by Miyuki, who had been both his best friend and his girlfriend, he felt as though he was completely ruined, with a year and a half still left until graduation. He wondered how he was supposed to survive all of that. Out of habit, he unlocked his phone, only to find dozens of messages, most of them filled with harsh words directed at him. One message, however, stood out. It said that, after what he had supposedly done to Amada, the other club members were too scared to be around him. The message ended with an apology and a request that he stop coming to the club. It was from one of his clubmates. Eiji couldn't believe it. He told himself that none of it was true, that he hadn't done anything wrong. But when he checked the group chat, he saw that he had already been removed. Unable to hold back his emotions any longer, he lay down on the bed, pulled the blanket over his head, and began to cry silently beneath it. After some time, once he had calmed down, Eiji apologized to the medical teacher for being a burden and told her that he was feeling fine now. She responded gently, saying that if he truly felt better, he could leave, and reminded him to take care of himself. As he walked up the stairs afterward, his thoughts turned dark again. He told himself that, for now, he would just have to get used to it, used to the pain, until his heart grew numb to people's cruelty. But even if he kept enduring it all, he believed people would still call him a creep and continue to hate him. Then a thought crossed his mind. Maybe there was a simpler option. Maybe he could just end everything by jumping off the rooftop. That, he felt, would make things easier. He opened the rooftop gate slowly and stepped out into the open. There, to his surprise, stood a girl, someone he hadn't expected. She was looking straight at him, and in that moment, standing at the edge of hopelessness, right when it felt like there was no way out, he met the girl who would go on to change his fate.